Do the same themes seem to keep coming up for you over and over again in your spiritual walk? Welcome back to Faith and Focus, a companion podcast to the TSA Weekly podcast, designed specifically for Christian business owners, helping us to seek God in all that we do in our business. I wanted to talk about something kind of a little bit different with you guys this week. Usually I talk about what God has to say about your business and things like that, but I kind of want to reverse it like a little bit this week. But before we dive into this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that little notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. So like I asked you at the beginning, sometimes the same themes seem to pop up a lot in the spiritual world, right? Whether it's in your morning devotional or your small group or something that your pastor says at church, things like that. And that has been happening for me a lot in the last couple of weeks. Like even here on the podcast, things that I've been talking about, I've been realizing there's a lot of connection in all of that. And, I think that this is one of those ways that we can know when God is talking to us. I remember we talked about this on an earlier episode about how sometimes it can be really hard to know when you're hearing God's voice versus hearing your own desires or hearing what other people are saying to you. And I think this idea of recurring themes popping up, this affirmation of certain things, is maybe one of the ways that God lets us know, like, hi, it's me. I'm trying to tell you something. And for me right now, that thing is God's will. And not only knowing God's will, but following God's will. And we've talked about that here about, trying to follow God's will for our business and in our business. And, it's funny because this is one of those times where I feel like, obviously I know that being a Christian informs and helps me as a business owner, but this is one of those times where I feel like being a business owner actually can help me as a Jesus follower, can help me in my faith. So, one of the things that we talked about over on the TSA Weekly this week is that need to stay adaptable, to keep showing up in our business and, keep being consistent, but not being so firm in what our plan and what our strategy is, because sometimes the plan that we have isn't actually the right one. And there could be some confusion there, I think, in the messaging when we're told you just need to persist, you need to show up consistently. And same thing in our faith, right? We need to talk to God daily, we need to read his word and all of those things. But it can be difficult when we're trying to follow God's path for us when we are so stuck in showing up the way that we think we're supposed to be showing up. We need to stay open to what God is trying to tell us. And sometimes what he's trying to tell us is, thank you for consistently showing up, but you're kind of missing the point. You're showing up, but you're showing up in the wrong way. And I need you to kind of pivot in a different direction. I need you to realize that the path that I have for you, whether it's for your business or your life or whatever it might be, is slightly different than the one that you think you're on. One of, I think, the most obvious ways that I see this, and, I'm going to equate this back to business because that's where we're talking here, but even when we think that we are following God's will for our business, doesn't mean that it happens along the timing that we're expecting, right? We may eventually get to that success. We may even be following the exact plan and path that God is laying in front of us, but things don't happen in our timing. They happen in God's timing. So it can be really difficult to know when we are just needing to be more patient and when we maybe need to be a little more open and adaptable to what God is trying to tell us. I know that a big part of it is making sure that we're showing up and talking to God regularly and listening to what he has to say, which means literally taking time to sit in silence. And it was actually while I was doing that today when I was preparing for the TSA Weekly podcast, I hadn't decided yet what direction I was going to go in for Faith and Focus. And all of a sudden, God popped up for me again, my will. I've been talking to you about this for a while. I'm talking to you about this in your morning devotional as I'm reading through Acts. I've been talking to you about this in small group. This came up for us last night when we were talking about Daniel. And, it's been coming up at church as well. I've just been hearing it all over the place. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe that's what you're trying to tell me you want me to talk about on Faith and Focus this week. So I just think that it's really important for us to remember that, yes, consistency is important. Building habits, even when it comes to our faith, can be really helpful because we don't always feel like showing up for our devotional in the morning. We don't always feel like going to church on Sunday. We don't always feel like stopping and praying and listening to what God has to say. So, yes, there is a level of habit and consistency that needs to be involved there. But that adaptability within that consistency is something that we cannot forget to do. So, I got to be totally honest here and say that I'm not entirely sure where God is leading this conversation. All I know is that he very clearly told me this morning, this is what you're meant to talk about on the podcast this week. So, maybe there's something he's told you to tell me. So, I'm stepping out in faith here. I'm just talking about the importance of God's will and how important it is for us to remain open and adaptable and not be so firm in what we think our plans are and just listen to what God has to say. Is there anything that he is putting on your heart right now that you would like to let me know in the comments? I hope this episode encouraged and inspired you. And if it did, please share it with another Christian business owner that could use the same encouragement. Thanks for being here. God bless you and your business. See you in the next episode.